So the president is also commander-in-chief. From the Constitution, the president shall be commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy of the United States, no Air Force when they were writing this, and of the militia of the several states when called into the actual service of the United States. So when does this happen? When, come on, computer. When is the president commander-in-chief of the Army? When can he call the militia of the several states into actual service of the United States? When can he do these things? When does this happen? When is it legal? When can he act as commander-in-chief? These are very complicated legal questions which are still not really settled. We know the president is always commander-in-chief of the armed forces. That is just a title that goes with the job. You're the president of the United States. You're commander-in-chief of the armed forces. That is without question. But it is debatable when he can use his that's what CNC is, commander-in-chief powers, depending upon really who you ask. Is it legal? Is it not? There are advocates that say we've been in illegal wars for much of the last 2 decades. Others would say the president might be justified in using force. That's something for you to decide. But it is Congress that constitutionally, this is a fact. This isn't an opinion. Congress has the constitutional power to declare war, and they did so last time. The last time they declared a war was June 4th, 1942, against Bulgaria, Hungary, and Romania, who had joined the Axis and sided with Germany in World War II. So, the legality of, say, Korea, of Vietnam, things like that. That's something we'll discuss. There's a unit coming up on the war powers of the president that I like to talk about, and students typically get a lot out of. But we got to get through this first, and we will. So early Americans really didn't give the political class many powers in wartime. And why would they? They had just fought off a tyrannical king who abused his powers and caused a whole lot of mess. But they also saw the failure of a weak executive under the Articles of Confederation. If you remember from your homework, it didn't, there wasn't much national unity going on. So early Americans, they wanted a single leader during times of conflict. But they didn't want this leader to be unchecked. George Washington was absolutely great. George Washington wasn't going to live forever. So they granted, everybody trusted George Washington, but, they had to think about what came after. They granted these powers to Congress. So Congress could declare war, and the president could act as the military leader, marshal the troops, and defeat our enemies. Control the military resources. Congress has that power. Congress can check the executive. The legislature, also the ultimate weapon, has the purse strings, meaning they can choose whether or not to finance a foreign war, which is a very strong check on the executive branch overreach. So the debate really boils down to this. People who are on the side of Congress say the declare war clause and the mark and reprisal clause of the Constitution really grant Congress very broad power over wartime activities. So since Congress has the ability to declare war, and Congress can grant letters of marque, meaning in the early days we didn't have a navy. in the United States. So any ship, for the most part, that could fit a cannon on board, Congress would issue these letters of marque saying you have our authority to attack British ships. They were legalizing piracy, in essence. So that was that. And they say that the president, POTUS, President of the United States, has no authority to initiate hostilities without prior approval from the Congress. People who side with the president say he has, the power to act as commander-in-chief when he wants to, because Congress only has power over funding and removal of executive officers. The executive vesting clause, which gives him, the president, the executive authority in this country, and the commander-in-chief clause really give the president all the power that he needs to insert our military into hostile situations. So there's a distinction really here. It's a fine distinction, but it's drawn between Congress's power to declare war and the president's ability to repel invasions of military force. So while Congress does have this power to declare war, also, if the Canadians invade Michigan, nobody's in Washington, nobody anywhere really in this country is going to say anything if the president sends the army up there to beat the Canadians back over the border. He has that power. That is his, to repel invasions of the homeland of the United States. The 48 contiguous states, Hawaii, Alaska, the territories, that is the homeland. And he can do that. Nobody is going to really say anything about it. So we'll talk about Operation Urgent Fury in part 2.